Hello and welcome back. Here today we'll talk about using Game Boy Studio again to create projects for our class about, we will talk much about Game Boy development and other things like that, but since GB Studio does a lot for us to kind of templatize games before we actually start coding them up from scratch, we'll just use GB Studio as the kind of template project for us as usual. Well, anyway, as usual, there I have project resources out there for download from my official website. You can go take a look around there. Not only do I have for the project we're creating, I was just thinking about making a Dragon Ball Z Game Boy game later or whenever I get around to completing it. I started off with some sprites. There's the Vegeta Super Saiyan, Goku Super Saiyan, Krillin, what's his name, Yamcha, just TN, just Piccolo with the cape off, Kami, Mr. Popo. Speaking of Mr. Popo, there's some other guys. I tried to put the Ginyu guys in here, some gear, and then some other templates that you can play around with if you want to make some other things. Also, some special effects like attacks, and I didn't really animate anything because I have to worry about how much memory and space I use. For this, is like Gildo with his head missing. I'm not sure which one's which, but we can play around with that since we can change the colors using Game Boy, using palettes and stuff. So even if these people aren't color correctly right now, if we change the color palette, swap color palettes, we can change what color they would be inside of a Game Boy game anyway. Or even if we need to comprise a character, like we have the armor and then we can put the legs on as an animation that goes up under it, and then change the heads out. That might be safer to do later for like a regular programming game. Also with Dragon Balls, and then there's the Scouter and the capsules and the I don't really have the sensu beans here, but we can come up with something nice later if we want to play around with that. Anyway, another quick thing to think about for Dragon Ball Z, would be with the heart disease and other problems that Goku had and his other rivals. If you thought about it, if he had sent, Mr. Popo to go anyway, if he's strong enough to fight two Super Saiyans, he probably would have won the fight anyway. That's just, anime conspiracy theories. With that being said, but anyway, we're working on a Alien versus Predator game. So the other day, I sat down, I drew a background kind of to use for just to import as an image. And Aliens, the Wayland Corporation is the organization that's part of there. I drew a hole in the wall, and then this is just like it's a top-down style game. That's just kind of a template of how I want it to look. And then if you go to my website, I think I have a sprite sheet that's available for you to download, at least how I wanted it to kind of look but the color palettes are off. There's a color I was using was this one, but just, since we're doing things to test it for other purposes, I just had, these aren't really the colors that are available for GB Studio, I believe, so I'm going to have to change these to kind of go along to coincide with the color palette that's used inside of GB Studio. So that'll be another problem that I have to work on another day. Another other thing that's different here is that these guys are transparent, and just when I load it into this particular operating system, there you see this other color of gray that's surrounding all the colors, which is not part of it. So if you look at it on the outside, it's white, and then if you go load it up inside of the thing here, another thing as usual is we'll kind of talk to you about what we'll be doing. Is that since I'm making a top-down shooter, I'm just going to kind of rotate the sprites, and then I can use half of or a corner of the sprite to do other animations for a character, because here I'm just swapping the sprite, and that just takes up a lot of memory. If I swap different parts of the sprite, I can make animations, even make the motion like these other arm things are moving, or the tail end is moving a different way, or I can do a lot if I just kind of swap. I can save a lot of things. Even here, opening the egg for the what's the I forget what the things are called. The chest burster. This is the chest burster. You can use the guy strapped to the walls, and you could do a whole lot of things. They have the predator mask and alien head and the human head skull and the disc, and this discs here, and there's the guy with the flamethrower, and this is the marine character right there. But this is the ground tile, and then this is some blocks for the corners. But it's just, this is a tile map. You can do whatever you want to do. These could be computer terminals or turrets to use for aliens or landmines, and it's black and white. So you can use your imagination. I was trying to add HUD elements and stuff, but I kind of got distracted because it takes a lot of time reviewing the stuff there. Anyway, back to Game Boy Studio. So that took a few minutes of your life. If you store a project somewhere, it'll ask you where to put it. This is, if you're not familiar with Alpha One, and Duke Nukem and things like that. If you're making game projects and things, kind of put it somewhere, a safe directory. You know, usually somewhere that you can find it tomorrow, depending on what day of the week you're working on these projects. So I'm making a Alien vs Predator fan game. I'm just going to save it to this project here. Inside of this folder, I already made some folders there for sound effects, tile maps, objects, for the game world in the 3 character classes that you pick from. The Marine, since this is a fan game, guys, it's not really for sale. Maybe we'll make it playable somewhere, and then maybe some other material that goes along with it. We're just trying to make it usable today, or as the days go on, for your project. So there's a different character class. Well, another thing I'll have to do is probably crop out, as I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Or we'll have to crop out the sprites off the sprite sheet. We're making a completely blank project today. Because inside the example project thing, these scene views and other things, they have names for them, but you have to look at the documentation. If you want to know what these parts of the project are called, you go to help, and then there's documentation there, and it'll open up a window that gives you some information here regarding the names of each one of those pieces of the engine, or the tool that you're using here. So, and from now on, we'll have to kind of we'll jump from the tool to the menu, so we can kind of see what things are called, because that would be a lot nicer there. Because if you haven't coded a Game Boy game before from scratch, or using assembly code or C, there's another library out there. There are multiple ones. There's even a library out there that you can use for making Game Boy Advance games. Kind of stuff I cover in the course. But anyway, all as usual, you just download from the official website. The official website is gbstudio.dev. They updated their logo again. It changes all the time. I'm just saying. And anyone who've ever, it looked different last time, and it does something different this time. So that's another thing that goes along with this. The tool updates and the systems update all the time, and so be aware of that. So when you're using something, as people see the videos and things on social media, if you encounter problems and you report them, people send to see your video too, and they update the system and move around and add some other features there. But anyway, back to the game project itself. All right, you have a scene here. You can actually add a scene to this. Hopefully everyone has the tool downloaded by now. I'll just call it what I call all my projects. Just whatever organization where you can. If I'm spelling this right. Anyway, whatever it is there. You can also edit the color modes for your images and what have you for your game projects there. You can add a scene by clicking the plus. Here they give you options. One of those options is to have an actor, which is the player itself. A trigger would be an event marker inside the game, and then a scene would be one of the areas. So things I add first is a scene, and that's just a square, right? A square that kind of gives you the game world. If you ever, for some reason, I've seen it in a lot of places maybe in a few minutes they'll update it. Maybe it's all the tool chain itself, but it takes a while to compile to produce the ROM that's playable. Anyway, they give you monochrome colors. That's what I use you see these colors here, this monochrome palette. Because remember, one of these colors in this palette here are transparent. So there's an actor right here. They give you the state and the information regarding the whatever the actor's name is would be here. All his attributes. The attribute of the player sprite has different argumentative tasks here, of if he's standing still, if he's rotating, other things. You can also, since it makes games for different types of engines and other, you may not be familiar with prefabs and other scripting constants and things like that, but it also has templates. If you go look down inside of the plug-in materials, I'm not really sure if it's plugins or I just play around with. They actually give you game state rules for different types of game style projects that you plan to create. Since we're making a top-down shooter, we'll just be rotating. We can swap between the different game modes based on different scenes. So I'm gonna add a different scene here. We'll just call it a scene here. You can name your scenes. So I can click on this. I'm not sure if it's the here or whatever it is. I'm not sure if they let you. We're just playing around with this today. But anyway, if you can run the scene, delete the scenes. You can actually change the color palettes for at least the whatever. You can color code them. We'll just do that for right now. So you can tell, you can name your scene. You can change based on that scene, whichever scene you have. There's already code set up for each one of those portions. Like this is there's a section for top-down shooters, and I could change another scene to platformer, right? Which may not be important to you, but you can mess around. I may need more sprites by making a platformer. One quick example is like if you're making a platformer game, as I usually teach game design on my free time, is that if you have a player, let's just use this monochrome example of a player sprite. There's a idle animation state, right? There's some kind of walking animation, maybe transitioning between the two could be walking. There's usually sometimes there's a attacking or shooting style animation. There may be a jumping, a hit animation, and a dead. So there's usually about 5 animations that you can kind of cycle through. A lot of times people, if you're thinking about saving memory, they'll keep the top part, and you can change the bottom, and they'll combine with the sprites, we call composite sprites. So you can have the top part and just animate the legs, and if I'm shooting, I can change the top part since it kind of saves memory. If I just save the top part, use the bottom parts for the sprite, I can have the gun out and walking at the same time, or use the splits, or change the head when he's hurt, and even if the character died, I can just rotate it on its side or its side axis to make it show that it's down. Not sure what's going on with that. Not installing Linux today. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Maybe that device is failing, so let's unplug it. I'm not sure what's going on. I usually use Linux. I kind of boot between operating systems, test cross-platform capabilities, so I download other operating systems to test out. There's other versions of operating systems out there you can use. If you're not familiar with Alien versus Predator, just a quick example of what we're trying to do is that there's an alien race, right? You've probably seen the movies. There's a Predator and there's a Marine. They all have different limitations about how they should be played with it. Here, just to simplify that action, we're going to add an actor to this scene. I'm going to add a plus sign. We're going to add an actor to it, and we're going to call this actor, right? And there's different directions that actor can take on. There's different speeds that you can kind of toggle for speed and fast, just depending on which one you're playing with. We could just tell you what, let's do something different here. Since we can color code the scenes before we know which one we're doing, we're going to make let's make 4 scenes. All right, let's make another scene. All right, let's line these guys so we can move it. We'll move it around later. Anyway, let's color code each one of these appropriately. So there would be, there's a human. Let's give the human red. Let's make the alien be purple. And then let's make the, I'm not sure what's going on with that. The other one be green. I have to name these scenes. So anyway, other things you can add. You can change the style of scene you have. You can, in this game project, let's go back to the sprite mechanics things I was working on the other week or month or year, whatever I was doing this. It's probably something I drew last year or the year before. Anyway, on the start screen, we can actually add font to GBU Studio, but you can be able to pick different aliens, the alien or the Predator or the Marine. But if you've ever played Alien vs. Predator 2 or Alien vs. Predator Gold Edition, there's a Primal Hunt expansion pack for Alien vs. Predator 2. I believe they made an online game about the tool for, they're making it free. It's on the internet somewhere. But anyway, if you pick one of these player classes, they have a different story. So I thought that would be nice too, because there's a Marine, the Predator, and aliens. There's some up, down, left, right. You could attack with the A button. You can shoot with the B button. And then you can we could change that based on at least the way the game is played later for the projects. But anyway, if you pick a character class, right, there should be the game should play different. I even made a cartridge, in case whenever I get it loaded onto the cartridge thing, I was going to print it off and put it in a real Game Boy or put it on one of these emulating consoles. But a lot of times you'll have a start screen, right? That's cool. If we were making this in the regular programming, you have a state machine where you transition between the menus in the game. You pick a carrot, you start the game, press start, and then you run your logo for whatever you're doing. There might be some map information. We'll have to figure out how to make that look nice and cute for this. But anyway, if you picked an alien, it'd be some kind of way to select the alien, and the sprite may go there, so we have a limited amount of memory to play around with. But I kind of already thought about what kind of the gameplay material, because I'm sure you're downloading this system yourself to play around with. The alien in the video games, he usually has a claw attack. He can jump, and some of the games they spray acid, but this is, I'm not sure we can even do all that on this, but we can try it out. But anyway, the Predator has the disc, and he uses claws and some other weapons. But the human is just a normal shooter thing. So HUD elements, I may have to do something different for these. I didn't put them on the sprite thing. You should be able to select different weapon modes, right? And then there'll be some kind of score and life system, and then it'd have to be some kind of way to kind of, I wanted to do some of the other features, maybe the, not even sure how we could do this on Game Boy, but that's in black and white, right? So you could make, the aliens and the predators have different vision modes, and even the Marine has different vision, heat, thermal sensing. There's other, things that kind of go along with these type of games if you're thinking about making variables. Some of them are just weapon classes, right? Some of these things that are the same, ditto. Think about Pokemon, right? Some things will be the same, right? They'll all have weapons that shoot projectiles. There's a life, right? And there's some other attributes there. So I was trying to kind of play around how to make, stuff efficient to be ported around, to be used for the game project, since I've been playing around with it for so long. But another thing you'll make the game world or whatever, have it starts, and then you may want to have, if you have a game world if you can load in an image to be used for the sprite itself, you can actually add things to it, like here, this for collision masking, you can actually zoom into it. Determine its occupancy. Like if you had a game world, you can use the squares here to kind of block in what parts of the game world. This is where I can walk, and that's what I can't walk. So this you can change the color of it and how much space you need to take up when you use it. What color you want it to be. You can actually have walls sectors here for collision mask for different parts of it. I believe on this example, I think that's what they use for that. Then they also have magic tools. They kind of simplified it, so you can kind of simplify the way you create game projects there. So anyway, so you add the tools, the sprite, and then whatever one has this arrow on will determine where your game window starts. I mean, that's just probably the best way to think about this. When it comes on, you'll probably have a few other scenes that kind of be a part of it. You probably need to name them associatively. There's a lot of things you can do with this. The default size of a sprite here is 20 by 18 there, and I discovered when you wanted to do this kind of project, there's for adding sprites and things, you actually have to have it inside the folder. I'm not sure if they fixed that since the last time I used it, but that's another problem I discovered that they'll probably have to maybe fix in later. But they also have support for plugins and things. Another thing I thought was just difficult is that because you have to put it inside the folder to actually use it. So when you have the project, whatever the project was named, you can make sure you save your project. And we're going to run it just to kind of show you how long it takes to kind of run this project. But anyway, you'll have a start screen. You'll have a menu screen or whatever starts. You can think about having a cinematic something, or because you can actually program in scripted events. So if you want to make 3 separate scripted events for your game project, we're teaching the core mechanics. We're making a game, but we're just taking this day by day. Because people like to learn how to use tools for things. There's actually scripting tools and actually defining constants for things like that. But also, another thing that's nice and important here for the game project, I was actually looking around for sound effects, or at least tools to make sound effects, because it actually has support for making music and sound effects here. If you click on the music sound effects here, you can import or add it, but we're compiling it right now, so that causes a problem there. So we're trying to run the game right now. But anyway, I was online looking around for music to be used for the game. We'll have to try to figure out how to score it ourselves, or if anyone wants to volunteer making Alien vs. Predator music. I saw some videos online that had made this. I'm not really sure who this is. Music Legends had a pretty good Predator Alien theme that was running pretty good. In the when I looked at it the other day offline, you can scan the QR code and find this song on the internet. You can skip into it. I'm not sure if the sound. That's pretty good. But anyway, with that being said, the problem I was having, got to make it 8-bit sounds of. Anyway, so if I put two players in, I think there's two. If I press left and right on the game project here, he can go up, down, left, right. That's pretty much all we'll need to do. Because one of those sprites is for so this is pretty much what kind of game we'll have. They collide on the wall. If we're making Alien versus Predator top-down shooter, as we've showed you in the description, I guess that's what I showed you a minute ago. I was trying to look over some sound effects as I'm doing this day by day. When I have free time to kind of work on it. Yeah, it's kind of hard. I'm trying to figure out how to make the sound effects, at least 8-bit version sound effects for Alien Predator sound. So that's kind of really one of the holdups. But anyway, the sprites are there. Maybe in the next video, since I'm taking a long time to kind of push this stuff together. If you're familiar with Game Boy Studio, it is a pretty hefty download size for the installer version. Installs pretty fast, based on your internet connections. It's available for all different operating system features. Those people using Windows, Macintosh, Linux, even I've seen people even run these things on their Chromebooks. People have free time out here. But anyway, we'll come back in a minute. Have the game running. I'm not sure where it is. Right now, I think I may have exited off. But anyway, we're making Alien vs. Predator game using Game Boy Studio. There's downloadable resources there. Maybe later I'll get around to that Michael Jackson game that people asked me about from class. We'll come back. We'll swap out some graphics that we talked about, loading in scenes for the game project. We tried to load in. Apparently, you have to put the materials inside to the folder before you actually, because there's no way really that I can see here where you explore to search for them. Like if example here, just to show you some of the limitations of the tool here. Okay, I need some tile maps for the player, right? So there's palettes and there's settings for different features here inside the game world. You don't see anything. There's game world sprites. Click on. Let me show you. No, not that part. Game sprites, right? For an actor, whatever this actor was. They have sprites, right? The player can go these different ways, and there's some tiles that go on here, but there's no way inside the tool itself to kind of explore to go. Like if you've played with Game Maker, there was this folder for. They open the file, the project itself, right? When you click this little folder there, it opens the project, so you can open where the assets are inside your project, and then you go find the sprites, and then you go and edit. You can go add your sprites into there. So that's what I'm gonna have to go play around with for a minute to get, so we can make a game in general. And then if you really want to play around with the real way, you can go and just second button on it, open with Paint, and then you can open it inside of Paint and swap out the sprites like that, or get the sprite palette and because you can see the dimensions of it, 46 by 16 by 16, and each one of them is 3 times. But some people don't not like to do it like that. You can get this, and you open up the palette, and you can swap it out. I'm not sure if I need to do that, because this will changing this actor here will change it for all the actors inside the scene. So let me go to the Alien. Okay. All right, let me go and get somebody who we want to play with first. Yeah, let's go find somebody decent. This is the project. This is where the project is still. This is some of the resources out there, but I didn't put any resources inside the folder. Okay, let's go get that Alien sprite sheet, and then let's go and swap out somebody. Let's go and get a person. Who we want to play with? Let's go play with an alien or something. See, inside of this time, when I opened up the sprite sheet, this is a. I think I have. This is the Predatorian. This is the what's this? The runner, and this is the drone. We'll get a drone to play with, and he's supposed to be 16 by 16 if I drew him in here correctly. But we have to be pixel perfect when we snatch up the graphics. And, I mean, I'm having some trouble right now trying to pull him off the sprite sheet. Let's just grab. Hopefully we got enough. We'll copy him off of the sprite sheet, and then I'm gonna open up the sprite sheet inside the project folder for this guy, and then I'll change out inside the assets folder. Sprites. Okay, static sprite. Yeah, open this one. With paint, we know it's supposed to be 16 by 16. It takes up a certain number of bytes, and the problem I discovered is if you don't have the color palettes correctly, I have to rechange this in a minute, but I'm gonna paste this person I just copied off of here. I'm gonna rotate this. And I copied it on top of that. I did something wrong there. Oh, I have to erase some of this. And that part, okay, and then that part there. It's going to cause a problem. One of the problems is that if I copy paste this on here and it was under a different color palette, so if the color palettes don't match, it'll create a because one of these color palettes that's used is the transparency. Usually this green color outside is the transparency, and so if that's the transparency color, anywhere that's a transparency color needs to be used in that area. That's probably one artifact that I see that it'll create. This tool is not the best tool I'm using right now to kind of fix this. Wait a minute, we'll do something else. Let me erase it first, because that's probably the problem that I'm seeing with my sprite. So let me erase this, and then I'm going to paste my sprite on top of it, and I'm going to flip my sprite. Okay, and then I'm going to get this green color and then color in all the areas that are white. Okay, and then I'm going to save this, and then we'll run it again, hopefully. I've changed this static sprite to an alien static sprite, and back in the tool we'll run it again. Hopefully that's fixed the problem. I don't know if I remember I was supposed to save it. Yeah, we'll save it anyway. Hopefully that'll fix the alien static sprite. And then we also have to do the same nonsense here, because we may, given the camera perspective, or through an orthographic perspective, that's the square style games. With this game, hopefully this game will load up. But you also have to. You won't see your sprite, I don't believe, without having that. Too many folders open. It's a website. And do I have 2 instances of this running? Yeah. Anyway, problem today. So you won't see your sprite if the color palette that I used is not the the one I'm supposed to be using. Let me save this. I need to update this. The problem of the day. Let me change this. Replace time. Well, anyway, we'll come back to it and try to figure out how to fix this so we can have the sprite be the alien sprite inside the tool. So when we load up the projects, we can see the sprite on the screen, because that's really the first. That's pretty much all we have to do is get the sprites on the screen, define the collision mask, put up properties for the characters, and then make spawners for the enemies, and at least do some other attribute things here. So the first problem of the day will be getting the sprites on the screen. All right, we'll come back to this and try to fix it, because the colors need to kind of match. And so when I load the game project, for example, at least that one, if it's using some other kind of idle sprite or thing that I'm doing there, I'm not sure if I need to change it inside the tool to kind of use it, because we're making an Alien versus Predator fan game, using these colors that are on the screen that kind of matches. Hopefully they, we have to line up the colors. So I'll come back to this. We'll talk about this in a minute.